What's up everyone, Riley here, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite currently ongoing manga series, so stay tuned. Alright, like I mentioned, we're doing my top 10 favorite ongoing manga series right now. These are for series that are currently ongoing. One series on my list is over, I think just one, in Japan, but it is still ongoing in America, so that's why it has made it on this list. I know that if I didn't mention that people are going to be like, wait a second, that's done. But anyway, I wanted to point out a few things. This is my list, this is my opinion, these are my top 10 series. I point that out because a lot of people in the comments will say stuff like, you know, why don't you have this on there? Why don't you have that on there? Probably because it didn't make it to my top 10. It didn't make the cut. I'm sorry. If a series that you love didn't make it into my top 10, it does not mean that I've read it and hated it or something. It could just be something that I've never read before, or it could be something that I have read and I enjoy, but it just didn't make that top 10 cut. But on that note, this is a living and breathing and evolving list, and I could make this list again every 6 months, every year, every 3 years, whatever it is, and it would be completely different every single time. Whatever number 1 is this time could wind up being number 5 next time. Whatever my number 15 is, wind up being number 3 next time. You don't know. It just depends on what's going on at that moment. Also, I wanted to note that I tried to stay away from titles that have been experiencing a lot of hiatus, and I tried to stay away from titles that are not available locally, like physically in English. But I failed miserably, and there is one book on here that is not available locally, and there are 2 books on this list that do experience a lot of hiatus. You'll probably be able to guess what those are before I even mention them, but there we go. Anyway, that's everything I wanted to go over before jumping into my list. So these are my top 10. This is my own personal opinion on these series, and they are on my list based on how I feel about the art, how I feel about the story, the characters, and more importantly, how they impacted and affected me personally. So let's get started. Number 10, at the 10th spot on my list, is a series that I started reading last year and almost immediately really fell in love with for its really charming nature and the fact that it's such a wholesome and relaxing series to read, and that is Comey Can't Communicate. Now, I'm going to say off the bat that this is a very different series than anything else that's on this list. Everything else is like shonen and seinen, a lot of action and stuff like that. Comey Can't Communicate is a very subdued, wholesome, just wonderfully put together little comedy series. But it's more than just a comedy series. It is one of the most heartwarming manga and one of the most heartwarming comics that I have read in a long time, and that's why it's on my list here. Basically, we follow the title character Comey, that's her in the front there, and she is seemingly, you know, your average high school student. She goes to school, she does whatever, but everyone has this impression of her that she is stuck up or something because she doesn't like to talk to anyone. She doesn't want to have conversations with people. She seems to ignore people, and they all have this impression of why she's like that, but no one realizes that the truth about Comey is that she has a severe communication disorder. She doesn't talk to people because she can't. Now, at the beginning of the series, we start to get to know Comey, and she meets this other character, another guy in her class named Tadano. And Tadano has those impressions of Comey from what he has gathered from her, from having not been able to speak to her before, but he would like to talk to her. He would like to get to know her. So he starts to try to dig in and see what's going on, and he finds out that she just can't really talk. So they start communicating by passing notes, and this leads towards one of my absolute favorite scenes of any manga ever, where it leads towards a giant chalkboard conversation of them just going back and forth and really getting to know each other, which is really beautiful because this character, Comey, like the title suggests, she can't communicate. She has such a hard time communicating with people, but finally this young man, Tadano, in her class, has opened up and tried to do whatever he can to get to know her. So she opens up to him and reveals to him through writing these notes back and forth that her goal, the main goal of this entire series, is that she wants to have 100 friends. And so Tadano, because he's just a great guy, says, cool, I'm going to help you out with that. And now you only need to make 99 friends because I'm your friend. And my heart melted that day. I love this series so much, and I love the characters in it, and there's so many great and very different characters, but the two main characters, Tadano and Comey, are just so great, and I think that the reason why they work so well, Comey's such a sweet character. She's such a sweetheart. She wants more than anything to be kind and to make those friends and to make those relationships, but she has that communication disorder that's really hurting her abilities to communicate with people and make those friendships. But Tadano is such a good guy that all he wants to do is help her to do that. And he's not doing this, he's not communicating with her, and he's not, forming this relationship with her for any particular reason, but to try and help her. And he's not trying to push her to do something that she doesn't want to do either. He's not trying to fix her, so to say. He's trying to help her reach a goal that she has established for herself. And I think that that's just such a wonderful point about this book. It is a great, lighthearted, heartwarming, wholesome series. Right now, I've read up to volume 9. I think there are 19 volumes in Japan at the moment. Volume 10 I have on the way to me right now. And I believe it does come out on a bi-weekly schedule. It's published by Viz. It's by creator Tomohito Oda. And it is under Viz's Shonen Sunday banner. So it has that S on the spine there for Shonen Sunday. So that's number 10. Number 9, this one's another this is a series that can be really heart-wrenching and really explores a lot of deep concepts. And it is one that is by the same creator as one of my favorite concluded titles, Yoshitoki Oima, and that is To Your Eternity. Of course, Oima previously did the series A Silent Voice, which is just an amazing series with great characters, great drama, one that I highly recommend to anyone. And they knocked it out of the park with their follow-up with To Your Eternity, or To You the Immortal, as it is also, I think, literally translated as. This series follows the character Fushi, and Fushi starts out as this kind of disembodied orb and quickly finds that they have the ability to take on the physical attributes of other beings once those beings have died. Fushi is immortal and spends their multiple lives taking on the different roles of these different characters, and throughout their existence they meet new characters and form these new relationships. And through that, this series really does a lot to give commentary not just on mortality, but on immortality in ways that I haven't really seen in other things that I've read before, because we really pay attention to a lot of what it means to be an immortal being and form relationships with basically anyone around you is going to be mortal. It deals a lot with the ideas of loss, and I think that if you have experienced loss in any way, and the emotional baggage that comes with that this series is going to give you a lot of feelings that you're going to be familiar with, and that's what it did for me. I did a video separately where I reviewed the entire first 12 volumes. Volume 12 is actually the most recent one that we have. That wraps up the entire first major arc, and I talked about the series for like about 30 minutes about what it meant for me and why it impacted me so heavily and why I love this series. But I really love this, and I can't recommend it enough. If anything that I've said sounds good to you, pick this one up. I think volume 13 is around the corner. This is from Kodansha Comics. I highly recommend picking it up. It's just such an emotionally heavy title that I believe anyone and everyone who's interested in manga need to read. All right, moving on. Number 8 is Vinland Saga. Now, this one is more of an action-heavy series, and it's from creator Makoto Yukimura, who I didn't recognize from their name, but as soon as I started reading this series, after many people recommended it to me a few years back, I recognized their artwork. And they had done another series that I absolutely loved back when I was in high school, and that was Planets, or however you want to pronounce it. That series was originally published by Tokyo Pop, and I believe the new editions came out published by either Kodansha or Dark Horse. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But I had no idea that they had another series that they had done with Vinland Saga, which, as the title suggests, this is a period piece that follows some Vikings. And basically we follow the character of Thorfinn, who is a young Viking who basically the entire series is him out for vengeance against another warrior who killed his father. We follow them throughout history and follow Thorfinn in his quest and his search for revenge. And we get a lot of really deep and emotional character beats, not only from Thorfinn, but a lot of the other characters that are involved in this series, that really elevate this from just being a nice action series to being a really great character piece. If you're into historical drama, this really hits those notes, but it also has spectacular artwork with great action throughout. This one is from Kodansha, and they publish it in these nice 2-in-1 hardcovers. Volume 11 is the most recent volume that's been released. Volume 12 should be pretty soon to come out, as we have Volume 23 in Japan, so that would be the first half of the American Volume 13. I highly recommend it, but just keep in mind that once you get caught up, because we only see about one of these hardcovers every year, it's kind of painful because you'll get really attached to these characters and invested, and then you'll have to wait a whole year until the next volume comes out. But I do highly recommend it if you're into that historical fiction and you like the idea of a really action-heavy but also drama-heavy series focusing around Vikings and stuff. Definitely check it out. Now, this one is the only one that is not available physically in English, and it is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8. So this is the first volume of Part 1. I just use this as a prop since I don't have a physical copy of Part 8, Jojolion. And it is pronounced Jojolion like Evangelion, not Jojo Lion like the Lions. Jojolion is, like I said, the 8th part, the most recent part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is creator Hirohiko Araki's generation-spanning shonen/seinen manga series. This 8th part takes place in this new universe that was created in Part 7, Steel Ball Run, and it takes place about a century or 2 centuries or whatever it is after the events of Steel Ball Run. I think it's about 120 years after, because I think this Jojolion is supposed to take place close to like the modern time. It has everything that makes a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series great, but it is also has the added effect to it that it is basically a giant enigma. The other parts of JoJo's tend to give you the information up front about who the characters are, who the antagonist is, what the aim is, what is going on here, what the point of the story in that part is. But I feel like Araki got to Part 8 and was basically just feeling like he could do whatever he wanted and people would still follow his work. So he didn't need to kind of, play within the boundaries. He didn't need to color within the lines anymore. He could bleed out and do whatever he wanted. And he's right. And so he gives us this series where you really don't know who anyone is. You don't know who the protagonist is, where they came from, why they're there. You don't know why they are who they are. You really have no clue who the antagonist is or what their aim is or what the whole point of the story is. And as each chapter of the series has come out, you become more and more familiarized with this world, and more of your questions become answered, leading towards more questions that need to be answered. And we're 90 some odd chapters in at this point. I'm a few chapters behind. I'll be honest about that. And it seems like we're really starting to get into that flow of actually having some of the questions answered. And it is such an exciting thing to see, just following this over such a long period, because these are monthly chapters. So, 90 chapters over 90 months. It's been going for a long while. So it's very rewarding to finally see these things come together. I would not recommend this if you're not already a JoJo's fan. If you are a JoJo's fan, you haven't read Part 8 yet, definitely jump on it because it has everything that you love about JoJo's plus more. And just when I think that Araki can't get better with his artwork, he does. and gives us some of the most beautiful work that he's ever done in the pages of JoJolion. So anyway, that is my thoughts on that series, and that is the only one on my list that is not available in English. So I just wanted to point that out. Alrighty, and next up we've got a shonen series and one of the most popular manga at the moment, one of the most popular anime at the moment, and that is My Hero Academia. This series, from the jump, has been turning heads and has become one of the biggest current series out there. The series, of course, is the superhero shonen manga that has been running in Weekly Shonen Jump for about 300 chapters now. In the US, we have most recently gotten volume 25. I think volume 26 is around the corner. This series takes place in a world where most people have superpowers called quirks. And these quirks allow them to have different abilities, all kinds of different abilities. You can, be strong, you can fly, you can grow, you can have fire, ice, you can stretch, you can, all kinds of different abilities. And so in this world, there are superheroes and there are supervillains, and there are schools that train young people that have quirks, that have abilities, to become heroes. So the main character is this young man named Midoriya. That's the dude with the messy hair on the front. And he does not have a quirk, but he loves superheroes. His favorite hero is All Might, the muscular guy in the back. And he wishes that he could be a hero, and he wants to go to the hero school and stuff. And some things happen, and one day he winds up mixing up with All Might, and All Might, eventually winds up being like, hey, I want to pass my powers on to you. And some stuff happens, and he winds up passing his abilities on to Midoriya, and Midoriya winds up being able to enlist in the school so that he can fulfill his dreams and become a hero. From there, the world just continues to expand. We get tons of new characters. We're introduced to these intriguing villains and groups of villains. Amazing plot lines, just very inventive cast of characters with very intriguing powers. There is no wonder that this is as popular as it is. I think that this is also it's one of the best superhero series, period. As much as I love Marvel and DC books, half of my library is Marvel and DC superhero books, I have to say that this series is doing a lot of what I wish Marvel and DC could do right now. It is establishing such a great and fun universe for these characters that is easy to immerse yourself in, and it's easy to draw in fans of all ages. There are people, around my age, young adults who love reading this series. There are younger kids that love reading this series. It's just such a great and fun title, and it is no wonder that it is one of the most popular manga at the moment. All right, now we're in the top 5. Number 5 is a seinen series that I started reading a few years back, and it quickly became one of my favorite titles to read every other month when new volumes come out, and that is Golden Kamui. Golden Kamui follows this handsome fellow on the cover, the immortal Sugimoto. Sugimoto was a soldier from the Japanese-Russo War, and basically he is going on this mission to find this hidden treasure, this hidden wonderful treasure that the only map that exists to find it is tattooed on the bodies of these prisoners who all were in this one prison at the same time. So Sugimoto is going off on this mission to find all of these prisoners so that he can get the maps from their bodies and use those maps to find the treasure. Pretty simple idea. But what makes this such a great series is it has everything. It has action, it has adventure, it has amazing characters from all over the place, all kinds of just very diverse characters. It has a lot of stuff about food. This is a food manga, and it's hilarious. It's one of the funniest manga that I read as it comes out. Every volume makes me laugh out loud more than I ever would have expected that a series like this would have, but it does. It has beautiful artwork, very well drawn, great action sequences. Literally everything I could ask for in a manga exists in this series. This is top-notch stuff. I think that as this series continues and comes towards its conclusion, this is going to be a masterwork, and I do believe that this is going to solidify a spot on my top 10 completed manga list once it does end. I cannot recommend this series enough. If anything like that sounds good to you, if you're into those kinds of this is like, you know, historical fiction type stuff, if you're into that, then definitely pick this series up. Like I said, action, adventure, drama, comedy, it's got everything wrapped up in one awesome series. Right now, volume 19 is on its way to me, so the most recent volume I have is number 18, and it is still going strong. I love this series. Every single volume that comes out is just a ton of fun. I love reading it. I cannot recommend it enough. I know the anime has come out. I don't know how popular the anime is or how well received it is, but regardless of that, if you haven't read the manga, definitely do so, because it is great stuff. Now, moving forward, this is one of the two titles that I mentioned is often on hiatus. This is an amazing shonen title from the creator of Yu Yu Hakusho, so you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but that is Hunter x Hunter. So Hunter x Hunter from Yoshihiro Togashi. I've been reading this since 2005, when this is the original printing of volume 1, since this volume came out, and I have honestly, it's been on my top of my list since then. It's always been one of my favorite titles since it's been coming out. The series looks innocent enough if you're not familiar with it. From the cover of the first volume, you have this child-looking main character, giant grin on his face, big old frog. It looks silly, but the series is dark. It goes pretty grim pretty fast. Basically, the synopsis here is that we have our main character, Gon, who wants to become a licensed hunter. Now, to become a hunter, you have to go through the hunter exam. And what a hunter is, they can be people who literally hunt animals. They can be people who are looking for, you know, criminals, like bounty hunters. They could be people looking for different food to create like the perfect meal. They can be people that are looking for treasure. Anything. But when you become a hunter, you get a hunter's license. You have to go through this rigorous hunter exam where you basically compete against a bunch of other people to get this license. And once you get the hunter's license, the world really opens up to you so that you're able to do a lot more than you can without one. And the main character, Gon, wants to become a hunter because he's looking for his estranged father, because you can't have a good shonen manga without an estranged father for the main character. So the first part of the series is him really doing the hunter exam, trying to get his hunter's license, and it introduces us to this world and a lot of the characters in the world, and starts to kind of explain some of the powers and some of the different things that exist in this world. But as it goes forward, every arc expands on this and is just evolving this really exciting world with really intriguing characters. And it does everything exactly right. The one big issue, though, is that this series has been on hiatus for most of its existence, pretty much. While there are chapters that'll come out every, year or two, he does put out about 8 to 10 chapters. That's 8 to 10 chapters every year or two instead of about 50 to 100 chapters like it should be, right? But regardless of how many delays it sees and how long of hiatus it hits, it is always one of my favorite titles, and when the new volumes come out, I jump on the chance to read them immediately. The most recent volume in the US is volume 36, and it currently is in material that is after the anime. The anime finishes out the Chimera Ant arc, but there are 3 or 4 volumes worth of material that do not exist in the anime. So if you are a fan of the anime but you haven't read the manga, I recommend reading the entire manga, because in my opinion, I'm always a fan of the manga, the original source material, really, above the adaptations, but also because the follow-up stuff that happens after the anime is definitely worth checking out. But that was number 4 on my list, so let's jump over to my number 3 pick. And this is the only one on my list that is completed in Japan, but it is not completed in the US, so it is still on my list. And that is Beastars. Now, every time I get a new volume of this series, I mention in my videos that it is one of my favorite ongoing titles, so it shouldn't be a surprise to most people that this series ended up here. Now, this one ended recently, I think in October of this year, with volume 22 being the final volume, coming out next January. In the US, we just had volume 9 come out semi-recently, so we're getting close to the halfway point of the series. I really wish that they would speed up the release of this, because it'd be awesome to get all 22 volumes a lot quicker than having to wait, 2 more years or so. Anyway, the series follows, main character is this wolf, Legoshi, in a world of anthropomorphic animals. And it takes place mostly in their school, Cherryton Academy. Cherryton Academy is known for being the place where a lot of Beastars are graduates from. And the Beastars are basically animals who become leaders in society as they grow older. So early in the series, all of a sudden we find out that a herbivore, an alpaca named Tem, has been murdered and eaten by one of the carnivores on campus. And initially it's Legoshi who's blamed, and then they do a little investigation into this, and it kind of veers away from that plot line and veers more into Legoshi and his kind of mental space and his relationship with himself as a person, as a character, while we explore the rest of this world and meet a lot of the other characters inside and outside of Cherryton Academy, including the rabbit Haru, and then the stag Lewis, and a bunch of other characters as well. I know there's a lot of comparison that's drawn between this and the movie Zootopia, because Zootopia also deals with the whole idea of herbivores versus carnivores, and that is an aspect of Beastars, but it is really just one of the surface level aspects of this series, as it delves a lot deeper into a lot of these characters and the animalistic nature that each of them has, which is something that's really interesting because it does a lot with the whole anthropomorphized characters, and not just like, oh, we're going to have a character who's a wolf and we're going to have a character who's an elephant, we're going to have a character who's a mouse, but actually giving each of these characters the attributes of those animals, and having those attributes, having those things really define them against a lot of the other characters. So like the dog characters have little attributes like they get really excited when someone's at the door, or like the rabbit characters, for instance, are known for reproducing quickly and stuff like that. A chicken character lays eggs, for instance, and small spoiler alert for one of the chapters in one of the early volumes, and she sells her eggs to a store on campus. So there's a lot of things that it takes advantage of the fact that these characters are animals in ways that make me appreciate this more than just having it be like, oh, it's just a drama series, but the characters happen to be animals. No, it really does use that for its advantage. And it is one of the finest character pieces that's on the stands right now. If you're not reading the series now, I highly recommend it to you. It's such a great title, and honestly, every single volume just continues to top the last volume. And this most recent one, I think I read this like 2 days ago, literally knocked my socks off. Not literally, my socks were still on as I was reading it, but it just floored me. The contents of each volume just continue to absolutely knock me away. I'm so impressed by this series. I cannot wait to read the next volume. I can't wait to read the whole series. This is a type of series where I am like deadly tempted to jump ahead and read it somewhere online or something, because it is that good. So please, Viz, if you're out there listening to me somewhere, if someone's listening to me, consider doing a monthly release for this one, because I would love to be able to read this at a faster pace. But yeah, again, such a great series. Number 3 on my list, Beastars. Definitely check it out if you have not done it yet. Also, side note, Paru Itagaki, the creator of Beastars, is the daughter of the creator of Baki the Grappler. So if you're aware of Baki, this is that creator's daughter. Anyway, moving on, number 2, and as I get to the top 2, these are 2 titles that everyone's pretty much going to be able to assume that we're going to be on my list. So yeah, if you assumed that these 2 titles were on here, congratulations, you got it right. Anyway, my number 2 is Berserk. I know a lot of people are like, what, number 2? It didn't make it to number 1. My number 1 is something that's really dear to me, so it's something that I think is going to be very hard to usurp that spot. But anyway, number 2 is Berserk. This This series has, of course, received a really big boost in popularity since Dark Horse started to publish these awesome hardcover editions. This is Volume 1. Volume 6 came out recently. I did originally read the whole series across the paperback volumes, so I am caught up with the series. I've read all the way through the Falcon of the Millennium Empire, and I've read into the beginning of the Fantasia Island arc and all of that stuff. So I am caught up, but I have been recollecting it in the hardcover editions because these are such beautiful books. Now, I know a lot of people love this series because, you know, it's this brutally awesome action series, dark fantasy. It has blood and it has gore and it has all kinds of mature content. And a lot of people love that stuff. And yeah, that's awesome, and Guts is a really cool protagonist and all that, but I think that that's very much just the surface of this series. The reason why this is such a great series and why this makes it up to my number 2 on my list and not, you know, like number 10 or number 7 or something like that, is because of Miura's exploration of loss and trauma and dealing with those things, and how extreme loss and extreme trauma can really impact someone's mental state. And that's really what Guts is. Guts is just a giant example of PTSD. And we follow from the beginning, we're thrown into this world where we're introduced to these characters and we don't really know why they are the way they are. We don't know what this world is. And we get into Guts' backstory and we get to explore why he has this why he has this mental state about him, and why he is the way that he is. And as we go forward and they explain these things and we show more of the things that turned him into who he is, that closed him off from being accepting of other people and accepting of physical touch and stuff from other people, we wind up getting this deep understanding of how his lifetime worth of traumas have turned him into the Black Swordsman. And as the series moves on beyond the Golden Age arc through Conviction and going to the Falcon of the Millennium Empire story arc, we learn a lot more about Guts trying to come to grips, trying to open himself up and try to deal with his trauma and his post-traumatic stress in a healthy way, and how difficult it is for him to do that because he's human, because it's hard to control your emotions sometimes, because it's hard to deal with these things. It's such a great look at that coping with trauma and coping with stress, and it's such a great look at dealing with toxic masculinity and all these different things. It's just such a wonderful introspective look at these characters. And I know a lot of people are starting to get into this series for the first time because of Dark Horse's wonderful hardcover collections. And I'm hoping that they're understanding these things about this series and that it's not all just blood and gore and hacking and slashing. And yeah, that's awesome. But the things that make this series literally one of the best manga of all time are how deep these characters are and how just expertly crafted the reactions to these things are that they have, and that none of this stuff that happens in this series happens for no reason. None of the trauma and none of the events that these people deal with happen just because. They happen for a reason. They happen as you wind up seeing this exploration of the unhealthy ways that someone can try and deal with their personal traumas. I could go on and do an entire dissertation for an hour-long video essay just talking about that and how important this series is and how well it captures these things. But I'm not going to do that here. Maybe in the future when I have the ability to do that, and I'll do that later. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. If you haven't read Berserk before, I highly recommend it. Keep these things in mind as you read it, because it does start off kind of in media res. It starts in the middle of things. But yes, definitely one of my absolute favorite series of all time, and I am so happy that it's getting more traction with non-manga readers because of the beautiful hardcover editions, because it's always nice to have more people jumping in and reading these great series. And that leads me to number one, and you've probably guessed it at this point, but my number one is One Piece. One Piece, I've been reading this since 2003. So 17 years I've grown with this series. When I started reading One Piece, I believe was when they were in Skypiea. So I've come a long way. If you've read One Piece, you know what I'm talking about. I've come a long way with this series. I remember picking this up. Well, I read it when it was in the Shonen Jump magazine monthly. I read a few chapters and I was very intrigued by it. And I didn't start Shonen Jump from issue 1. I didn't start it until like issue 8 or something. So I went back and bought the first few volumes. This isn't my original copy, by the way. I bought the box set later on. But I did have the original with the foil on the front of the first like 4 or 5 volumes. So I went back and bought those. And I remember being in New York. And I bought a copy of volume 1 and 2 from Midtown Comics. And while I was in New York was the release date of volume 3, so I quickly went back to Midtown to pick up volume 3. And it was material that I'd already read in the magazine at that point, but I wanted to grab it anyway to kind of build that collection. I fell in love with these characters. I fell in love with this world. In the series, we follow Monkey D. Luffy. He's the joyful-looking guy there on the front who wants to become the king of pirates. Basically, in this world, we saw the king of pirates, Gold Roger, says when he was getting executed that he hid the ultimate treasure in one piece at the end of the Grand Line. The Grand Line is a line of islands that goes around the world, and you have to travel around that line in a certain way, and only the best pirates, the Pirate King basically, as they suggest, can make it around there to the end to find that treasure. So Luffy decides that's what he wants to do. He wants to be the Pirate King. He wants to find that treasure and prove himself. So he sets off and he begins to explore and gain his crew, his nakama, his friends, and together they wind up each having their own separate goals that lead them towards the Grand Line and with the goal of making it all the way around. The series is now reaching its 1,000th chapter. 1,000 chapters. I believe that 1,000 chapter will be the first week of January of 2021. Right now, volume 95 is on its way to me. I have volume 94 here, and I know that that's really overwhelming. 95 volumes of a manga. 1,000 chapters. So a lot of people just don't even try and are very intimidated by it because of the length. But it's one of those things where once you start and once you really get into it, once it snaps for you, it's so hard to not want to just completely immerse yourself because this world is so expertly crafted. Eiichiro Oda, the creator, has done such a brilliant job in creating this entire world and building these characters and their relationships and all these different species and these different cultures that exist across the world and how they interact with everyone. He does such a wonderful job of setting up this entire series and this entire just history for the world of One Piece that it's almost flawless the way that it's put together. I can't speak enough praise for this series, but obviously a lot of my love for this comes from the bias because I literally grew up reading this. I'm 30 years old now. I started reading it when I was 13. And I literally grew up alongside these characters. I've watched the art style evolve. I've watched the characters evolve. I've watched the story grow just as I have. And with that, I've formed this really deep and personal relationship to One Piece. And I know there's a lot of people that, who haven't read it yet, who, like I said, are overwhelmed. And a lot of people, kind of poke fun at it because it is so long. And when something is so long, it sometimes feels like the creator might just be spinning their gears because that is what happens a lot of times. But with One Piece, it's such an expertly crafted story that you can tell that Oda has had these plans for this series all along, and some of the stuff he does pull out of thin air and just slap on the page to kind of make things move along, but you can tell what was planned, and you can tell that a lot of work has gone into making this world, and it's something that I love, and I can't help but loving it. And I think that no matter what else I'm reading at any given time and how good those titles are, that One Piece is always going to come out on top, no matter what, because it has that special place in my heart, because it is the series that I've been reading since before I've known most of the people that are in my life right now, which is just insane. So anyway, that is my list. Those are my top 10 ongoing manga right now. This list, like I said earlier, is subject to change as time goes forward, so if I was to revisit this idea in a year, I'd probably have mostly completely different list going on here, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do this later again, but that's it. That's my list. Like I said, some of you guys probably are thinking, you know, where is this series? Where is that series? Don't worry about why certain things aren't on my list. I want to know what's on your list. What are your top 10 currently ongoing manga series? Which ones do you love? What are your favorites? Let me know down in the comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. Without further ado, that is the end of this video. Thank you so much. I know this is a long one, but it was something that I put a lot of thought into and a lot of care into kind of cultivating this list until I was happy with what turned out. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.